What's going on, folks? Welcome to Icopod. I am your host, Be Good, and you're watching the lunchtime pop up. I don't even know what I'm calling this segment, but we're going to talk about the Bible's three body problem today. So come on into the chat and let's talk about it. There's an old adage that says if you tell one lie, you have to tell another lie. That same rule applies to fiction because fiction is not lies, but it's also not true. So every time you create a fiction and add to the fiction, you have to augment your story with more fiction to make it more believable. And we're going to show how that principle applies to something very interesting in the Bible. But just come on into the chat and we'll talk about it in a minute. What's up, Mo? Good to see you, fam. Yes. I got on a minute ago and I saw there's a lot of stuff popping off. Tim Mills was on live today. Justin is on live today. So I appreciate you all taking time to slide by Icopod and say what's up here. I know you have a wide range of choices of who you're going to check in with and what shows you're going to watch. But appreciate you guys sliding through. Michael Apple, what's up? You missed the whole first minute. Well, guess what? You know what I mean? The first minute is never really where all the firepower is anyway. So Michael Beverly in the house. Michael Beverly's been launching all kinds of great content. Hope you guys are subscribed to his channel. Look at the trees. What's happening? Good to see you. Yeah. We're going to talk about the Bible's three body problem. In the chat while we're waiting for people to come in, what do you think I'm talking about? Maybe the thumbnail will give you some indication. I don't know. What do you think the Bible's three body problem is? Let's see how intuitive or how in tune you all are out there. Ew, my unique Monique, what's going on, y'all? So we are going to actually go back and revisit something that I said I was done with, but it ties into this pretty well. But in the meantime, I'd like to give a shout out to some folks. You know who they be. All of these beautiful people right here. Thank you to all the Patreon supporters. Thank you for rocking with the channel and supporting, sending your thanks and your shout outs. Those of you who are Patreon supporters, you know, I'll say this to those who are not. What Patreon supporters get aside from just shout outs and behind the scenes, every once in a while, I'll show some behind the scenes. I got a lot of content that I haven't posted from other interviews that I'm waiting to edit and put up for the Patreons. But also, if you're a Patreon supporter, you can ask me any question, anytime, on any platform, and I will almost certainly get with you ASAP if you're a Patreon supporter. So whether it be on my Facebook DM, whether it be in the Patreon app or anywhere else, or here on YouTube, as a Patreon supporter, I am much obliged to make sure that I respond to your inquiries. So holler at me if you're a Patreon supporter. If you're not a Patreon supporter, become one. $5 Icopodians, and then the Icofans at $10 and more per month. So, all right. So somebody in the chat who was, I think it was Look at the Trees, said the three body problem is that the Trinity. Michael Apple says not about the unpredictability of Proxima and Centauri's orbit. That's the traditional three body problem in physics and astrophysics, I guess. Michael Beverly chimes in and says, "Come on, it's got to be the Trinity, right? The gospel, different gospel stories. Maybe the movement of the sun, the earth, and the moon." So yeah, the title was inspired by the Netflix series Three Body Problem, but actually, this three body problem came to me when I was watching the video that I was critiquing or reacting to from the Jude 3 project. On part 3 of that, there was a part that I got to that I said, oh, I'm going to skip this for the sake of time, but it's actually a really good issue that I want to get back to. So I'm actually going to spin the block, play a snippet from their panel, and show you why I think this presents a three body problem for the Bible, for the God of the Bible. And to be honest, it actually will get into the Trinity a little bit, but it's not primarily about the Trinity. So you'll see what I mean in a second. Let me just make sure the audio is straight. If you guys hear anything that's not like it's supposed to be, make sure you flag me and let me know. All right, so here's the good thing about people like me having deconverted. I was, for lack of a better term, I was a theologian. I was in seminary studying to just be a better apologist. But even before I entered seminary, I did Bible college back in the early 2000s and then seminary in the 2010s. But even before Bible college and even before seminary, I was a lover of the Bible. I wanted to understand how the Bible was, how it all fit together, how the stories, every jot and tittle, I wanted to understand. I was interested in this person's view. Well, they disagree with these people, and I'm trying to figure out where do I stand in light of all these. There's 4 views on this, 5 views on that. Can I reconcile these views, and then can I reconcile these passages in the Bible that seem to not cohere? But theologians are studying the Bible to try to figure out what is its message. And most theologians in the Christian world are looking at the Bible as a univocal work, that there's one seamless thread going from Genesis to Revelation. Critical scholars, they're theologians too, but they're not theologians in the sense of trying to make it all unified. They're theologians in the sense of they're trying to understand. I don't even know if they would call themselves theologians. If you're in the critical space, do you call yourself a theologian? Because at that point, you're not trying to get theology out of it, but I'm sorry, I'm warring with myself because I'm thinking of the liberal theologians. And yes, they do not see necessarily a univocal framework for the Bible, yet they are theologians. I'm thinking of all kinds of people in the liberal camp. So anyway, I was trying to find out how there was a unified voice in the Bible. But as a theologian, what you become aware of is, why are the biblical authors saying the things that they're saying? And you realize, especially as it gets to the New Testament, but the Old Testament too, a lot of it is reactionary. A lot of the things that you find in the Bible are people trying to answer certain challenges, certain questions that are coming from their community, coming from their culture. And so you're writing things hoping that what you write is going to speak to all of the boundaries to faith that are being put up by other people. A lot of it is apologetic. Even if it's polemic, it's trying to find out how can we still believe our thing in light of what they're saying over there. But if you don't know what they're saying over there, and you just read this author's work, you won't know why he's saying what he's saying. So for instance, I don't buy this, but there are some Christians, I think Dan McClellan just did a video about addressing this. There are people who would say, the reason why Paul in 1 Timothy tells him, I don't allow women to speak in the church, they would say, oh, no. Paul wasn't saying women can't speak in church. Paul was talking about what was happening in Ephesus at that time. We had temples where the women were the priestesses and they were in control of the religion. And then they would become Christians and they would try to bring that same framework into the church. And so Paul wasn't saying, I don't allow women to speak. Paul was saying, I don't allow women who are priestesses to come into the church. And so they try to look at what Paul was speaking to, and that will help you understand what he's saying. That's just, I don't know that I buy that that's why Paul was saying it. I think Paul was making a general rule for the churches, or if it's not Paul, whoever's pretending to be Paul in 1 Timothy. I think that's a general rule for the churches, but I'm just saying that to say that's a example of how people try to get the context of the writing by looking at what was happening around them at the time. Hey, tell me in the chat, can you guys hear like a motor going? Like right outside my window, there's somebody mowing grass. And so I don't know, I can hear it. It's distracting me. I don't know if it's distracting y'all. So just give me a yes or no in the chat. Do y'all hear a lawnmower? If y'all don't hear it, I'll just keep rolling. I'm only pausing because the live stream is 20 seconds behind. Okay. Thanks, Crystal. Very faint. So y'all do hear it a little bit. No more. Okay. So it's here and there, hit or miss. All right. I'll keep going. So why am I saying that? I'm saying that because in the Gospel of Luke, the author does something and you don't necessarily know why he's doing it. You just read it and you take it at face value, like, oh, I guess that's just how it goes. But if you realize what's happening in the culture, you realize, oh, that's why he's saying that. So I'll read it and then we'll dive in. Thank you for those who are commenting still, saying, no, I don't hear it. Appreciate that. All right, so let's start in Luke chapter 24, verse 36. This is after the crucifixion and now after the resurrection. Jesus is risen, but many people don't know he's risen. And so you got two people walking on the road to Emmaus, and Jesus snuggles up beside them on the road and starts trying to find out, hey, what y'all talking about? And he like, oh, you don't know? Jesus was crucified. And they start having this conversation. Jesus sits with them and he breaks bread with them. And when he breaks bread, they like, yo, that's him. That's the boy. That's Jesus. And he vanishes. So the two people that Jesus supposedly does that with, they go into town and they tell the rest of the disciples. But the disciples don't believe it. So now watch what happens. While they were saying these things, they, being the two people who were on the road to Emmaus, while they're saying these things to the other disciples and the disciples don't believe them, verse 36 of chapter 24 in the book of Luke, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, peace be with you. But they were startled and terrified, thinking they saw a ghost. Then he said to them, why are you frightened? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? Look at my hands and my feet. It's me. Touch me and see. A ghost doesn't have flesh and bones like you see I have. When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they still could not believe it, so he shows them his hands, his feet. Ghosts don't have flesh and bones like I do. While they still could not believe it because of their joy, and they were amazed, he said to them, hey, y'all got anything to eat? So they gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in front of them. All right, so peep what's going on here. The author is trying to convince the reader, because he knows readers and people are going to have doubts that a man who lived and died, was crucified, and one of the most violent deaths at the time, died that way, came back to life. Of course, you're going to be skeptical, but he wants you to know, as a reader, as part of the Christian community, he wants you to know, don't worry, you're not alone if you have doubts. Even his own disciples doubted. And he showed himself to them. Like he didn't even show himself to you. He showed himself to them and they doubted. But don't worry, reader. Don't worry, Christian community, because he proved it even beyond them just seeing his hands and his feet. He said, do y'all have anything to eat? They say, yeah, we do. Broiled fish here. He took it, and then the author makes sure to say, he didn't like take it and then say, all right, I'll be right back, and then go outside and then come back like, see, the plate's empty. No, you could have gave it to the dog, or who knows? The author is sure to say he ate it in front of them. Now, you might just read it and think, oh, that's just how the story goes. But you got to know the author is saying that for a reason. There's something going on at that time that makes the author want to, have to say that. He ate it in front of them. This was supposed to be irrefutable, indisputable proof. He must have risen, and not just risen, he must have risen in bodily form. Well, what do you know? You know some things about Gnosticism, right? Gnosticism is this idea of there being this secret knowledge that not everybody has. Only a certain amount of people have it. They were Gnostic Christians who had this secret special knowledge. Well, the Gnostics are riding on the back of something that came before them, which is called Docetism. Docetism is a view, what is taken from a Greek word meaning to seem. The Docetists were people who believed that Jesus, either the entire time while he was on earth or after the resurrection, did not have a physical body. He only seemed to have a physical body. And because the Docetists, I don't even know how you pluralize their sect, because they were propagating their idea that Jesus didn't have a real body, the gospel writers, particularly John in a few cases and Luke, wants to make sure that you know this Jesus, it wasn't just he seemed to be resurrected, he seemed to have had a physical body. No, it was a real body that he had while he was alive on earth and a real body that he had when he resurrected. How do you know? Because he ate food in front of them, and ghosts can't do that. So here's what you got to keep in mind. This is building up to the three-body problem. That's not necessarily a problem for us because we would take the story however it comes to us. It was a problem for them because for their own reasons, they wanted to ensure that this Jesus was a physical person before and after resurrection. They solved the problem of the Docetists, whatever. They solved that problem by making sure you know he eats real food with his real body. They could have solved the problem, however, they chose to solve it that way. But by choosing to solve it that way, it creates problems for other parts of the story. Maybe you're starting to realize, oh, wait, this could be a problem for something else that happened in the Bible. See if y'all can catch on to what's going on here. So I know this as an author. Like I wrote a novel, a fiction series called City of Allegory. And I remember when I was writing that book, there are things that I said in book one that sort of hedged the reality of the book into a certain way. Things had to happen a certain way. If you had chains on your wrist and your neck, you couldn't do certain things. If you only had one hand chain, you couldn't do certain things, but you could do other things. By the time I got to book two in the series, I remember saying there were things I wanted to write, but I was like, oh, damn, I can't write that in book two because in book one, I said, if you've got the chains on, you can't do this. So I had two options. No, I had three options. One option was to write a new rule in book two that says, even though I know it says in book one, you can't do such and such if you have the chains, you could, if I could make this new exception to the rule. Or I could just say, well, because book one says you can't do that, I'm just not going to write this in book two. Even though I want to, I can't do that. I painted myself in the corner and I can't. The third option is to allow somebody in book two to do what I said you can't do in book one and hope that my readers are gracious or blind or overlook the fact that I said you can't do this because it's a contradiction. I'm saying that for this reason. If the New Testament author, Luke in particular, wants to solve the problem of Docetism by saying, no, Jesus had a real body and ghosts can't eat food. Like there's no law that says ghosts can't eat food. You could make a new exception to the rule that says, hey, some ghosts can eat food and it's okay. No, for whatever reason, you felt hemmed into Jesus has to have a real body. So I'm going to write in this text, he ate it in front of them to prove that he wasn't a ghost. That means you can't be a phantasm. You can't be a ghost. You can't be a vision. You can't be something immaterial and actually eat food Because once you eat food, according to Luke 24, that proves you have a real flesh and blood body. That's what Luke just did. He hemmed every other book of the Bible. Whoever wants to tell a story about bodies, he's hemmed them into this rule that once you eat something in front of somebody, that is proof that this is not a vision anymore. This is not some phantasm. That's a real body. Let me go to the chat. Can anybody detect based on that, what is the three-body problem of the Bible based just on that alone? Can y'all see what the issue is? What other biblical author has Luke just painted into a corner? Champ says, if he ate food, did he take a holy shit? All right. While you guys are typing in your answer, I'm going to go back to the Jude 3. Here's what Christian theology has done. Christian theology has presented Jesus to us as this is the only time, the only place in human history where you have this idea of a God actually being incarnate. Let's let the Jude 3 choir sing their special selection to us. Here they go.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think the other thing, this is real talk. I was not going to say it nearly as eloquent as that. This is one of the reasons why I'm a Christian, is because in Jesus the Christ and in the story of God's work in humanity through Jesus is the only example of God becoming human flesh. Meaning, if you look at some of the other would-be religions, they have views of deity that hate people, that pit people against one another, that seek sacrifice to destroy humanity. It's a lot of petty pieces. But in and through the Christian lens, we actually get a view of God that values humanity, loves humanity, and here it is, condescends and becomes one of us.
All right. So according to Jude 3 and many other Christian understandings of the incarnation of Jesus, God becoming flesh, this is the only time, the first time that God has done something and I used to say this as a Christian a lot, especially around Easter time. Matter of fact, even during my deconversion, I think you can go back as far as 2019, maybe even 2020, when I was still trying to hold on to the faith. I wasn't saying very many Christian things, but on Easter, I would say things like, if there is no resurrection, if there is no incarnation, even if God has never become man, then the God that whoever created us has never touched down, has never interacted with humanity. And so I would use the Jesus story as, even though I'm struggling to believe it, why I want to believe it is because this is the only time we have where God came close. Jesus represents that for us. I mean, anybody throw it in the chat? Nobody threw it in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and spill the beans. Actually, no, there is another biblical author who ruins what Luke tries to do here, especially if Luke is going to tie Jesus eating food to him actually having a body. So if you go back to Genesis 18, you have a story where God, the Yahweh character, actually comes to Abraham. Now, we want to say he came in the form of a man, but remember, Luke just told us, if you sit and have a meal, this is not a vision anymore. This is not a ghost or some kind of phantasm. You're talking about real flesh and blood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a song from a Christian rap group. Some of you who may be familiar with my old background in Christian hip hop, there's a group called housekeeping, and they have a song where they actually rap their way through Genesis 18. So I'm going to play that verse from their song. The album that this song is on is called Theophanies. And a theophanies is an appearance of God, particularly in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, where God seems to appear, what's the word I just used? Seems to, right? Docetism. God seems to appear in the form of a man, but of course we know God's not a man. So whatever you're seeming to be witnessing can't actually be God in the flesh because God's not a man. So now let's let Hazakim rap to us about God becoming man. You're going to hear part of the chorus, and then they're going to rap Genesis 18, and then we're going to wrap it up.
It is written, no man may see God and live, yet the old covenant states times when they did see a man or an angel equated with God. So who was it that they saw? It's Abraham sat by his tent in the heat of the day, swatting flies and mosquitoes away. He looked up and saw 3 men meters away in the distance. So he arose and hurried from the entrance of his tent. Then he bent low down to the ground. In a position of submission, he voiced his petition. If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, I beg of you, do not pass your servant by. But let some water be brought so you can all wash your feet and wait in the shade of the tree as I prepare something to eat, that you may be refreshed when you go on your way. Very well, they answered, do as you say. As they ate the lavish meal, Abraham stood by like a servant waiting to fulfill his master's will, cause he understood that one of the 3 was the invisible Lord manifested in physical form. And the scriptures testify that this man, when referring to himself, used the name of the Most High and prophesied that he would return in a year to give Abraham and Sarah a child, and alas, it came to pass. So is it really crass to say that God became a man? And is it contrary to the faith of Abraham? Then who was it that he saw in the afternoon heat, eating bread and meat with dusty feet and all? It is written, no man may see God and live, yet the scriptures declare that the...
Yes, I used to love that song when I was a believer. I still think it's great hip hop. And what me and the community that I was a part of, what we specialized in doing was blending faith and culture. And I think that was a great blend of faith and culture. They were or are messianic Jews, Jews who accept Jesus as the Messiah. But think about what Genesis 18 did. It says Abraham's chilling in his tent. He gets a visit from 3 men. The scripture is plain. It says 3 men. And as these 3 men come, one of them identifies himself as Yahweh. Now, remember I said earlier, it is kind of going to get into the Trinity a little bit, because Christians are very hyped to look at this way. If Yahweh God came to visit Abraham as 3 men, isn't this at least prefiguring, if not fleshing out, the idea of the Trinity? One of them identifies themselves as Yahweh. Abraham perceives that this is Yahweh, says, hey, my Lord, don't pass me by. Let me fix you something to eat. And the Yahweh character says, do as you say, make it so. He goes in, tells his wife, yo, the Lord's here. Let's hook it up. And then they sit down and they have a meal with Yahweh and 2 others. We can get to who those 2 others are in a second. But once again, you've got to keep in mind now what Luke has done. Once Luke could have solved his problem with Docetism any way he wanted. He could have made a special rule that said, no, the kind of body that Jesus had, whether it be physical or non-material, whatever, it was able to still eat food. But he wanted to make sure that the Docetists, we got to get them out of here. So let's prove Jesus had a real body. So he makes this rule in his fiction, his gospel, that ghosts don't have flesh and blood like I have. And if you're still doubting, let me eat this in front of you to prove I've got real flesh and blood. Well, if eating that meal proved that he had real flesh and blood, what does eating the meal do for Yahweh and the 2 that are with Yahweh? If you want to take the Bible as a univocal story, if you don't want to say, oh, well, no, the authors had different views and different ideas, different theologies, even if you don't want to do that, if you want to make it univocal, then whatever Luke says has got to apply to what the author of Genesis is saying. So when Yahweh eats the meal, Yahweh doesn't just seem like a man. Yahweh doesn't just appear as a man. Yahweh has real flesh and blood, according to Luke. Now, I know those who are going to want to attack this video are going to try to say, oh, you can't make Luke be talking about what author of Genesis said. But isn't it a univocal story? Don't the rules apply? Yahweh's eating this meal. Yahweh is not just a vision or some kind of phantasm or some kind of, Yahweh's got flesh and blood. For those who want to say this is prefiguring the Trinity, you've got even deeper problems now. Because if this is God the Father, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit eating these meals, then all three of them have flesh and blood. Now, maybe they just assumed flesh and blood for this encounter. But here's the problem that you create by trying to solve it that way. If Jesus is even there at this meal with Abraham, and he's got flesh and blood there, the question you've got to ask yourself is, so then why did God need to impregnate Mary with this incarnate baby Jesus if in Genesis 18, if Jesus is present at that meal, they didn't need an incarnation there. They didn't need a virgin birth there. Why does Jesus need a virgin birth in the New Testament? Clearly, God can just make him a body like that. And not only can, he already has a body. So then is the same person that appeared with Yahweh in Genesis 18, is that the same body that was like reincarnated or back into Mary? Trying to solve your problem in Luke 24, you've created all kinds of problems for other parts of your text. We could even get into the idea of this also demonstrates that in the gospel narratives that make Jesus have to be born again, or not born again, born of Mary, it's extemporaneous to just pull that out of the air and just say, hey, I'm going to make this happen here. You're doing that because the culture around you is used to having gods birth their children through human women. You didn't need to do that because earlier in the story, if you're going to make Jesus one of those three in Genesis 18, he's already got a body. All right. So you solve a problem in Luke 24, you create other problems for Genesis 18. Even though I love that song from Hazakim, I call this one of the many plot holes in the Bible because if the Holy Spirit is there, the Holy Spirit's got a physical body too. Like, what's going on here? Or do you want to reduce it to no, it was just Yahweh and these two others, or maybe they're angels. Maybe you want to say, for the sake of your theology, maybe you want to say Jesus and the Holy Spirit weren't there at all. Because like I said, these are not visions anymore based on Luke's rule. These are real bodies that appeared here. Luke's painted the author of Genesis into a corner. You can't have it both ways. You can't have proof that you can't have him eating food be proof that he's got a real body, and then it not be proof of a real body in Genesis 18. You can't have your cake and eat it too, or your curds as they had in Genesis 18. And you can't have it and eat it too. You know what I'm saying? Let me make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat here. So yeah, plot holes in the Bible. All they do is they show you the human nature of it all. Like I said, as an author, I know what it's like to get to a point in your story where you like, I wish I hadn't said this in an earlier volume, but since I said that, now I've got to be consistent, or the literary world that I'm creating is going to be inconsistent. It's not going to be coherent. It's not going to. The problem with one of the many problems with the Bible is you've got so many authors saying so many things, because even Hazakim in the song say, because here's the problem that Hazakim was trying to address. They say it at the end of the verse. They say, is it really inconsistent with the faith of Abraham? This is to Muslims and anybody who wants, or even Jews, anybody who wants to say that God can't become a man in the person of Jesus. Hazakim was saying, well, he did it in the Old Testament. God became a man there, but they're trying to solve a problem that creates new problems. Because God didn't just become a man on that occasion. God literally, according to Luke, assumed a body, which is a problem. I'm saying all of that to say, if you recognize the plot holes in the Bible, the inconsistencies in the Bible, it helps you peel your heart away from thinking like you can't assault the Bible. You can't assail the Bible. You can't critique the Bible. You can't talk down about the Bible. You can't, because it's a divine book. If you're a Muslim, you can never have the Quran on a lower shelf in the house than any other book. It's got to be on the highest place in the house. Christians, likewise, there's this legend or this myth or this auspicious, some kind of like mystery where you see the Bible as this thing that you've got to be careful around. That's why you you go to court and they'll make you, I don't know if they still do this, before you testify, you'll put your hand on the Bible and you'll swear. Why? Because they feel like there's something about this book. It's so holy, it's so divine that you can't lie when you're touching it, or you can't speak against it. If you let that legend, if you let go of that legend and you let go of that myth and you let go of that narrative that says, I can't look at this book as some kind of untouchable, unassailable thing, and you see it for the man-made, shoddy in many instances. It's very shoddy. It's very like the guy said in the video that we watched the other day, the Jude 3. He said, if you pull a string or a thread in Genesis, Revelation will crinkle. Well, if you pull that string hard enough, Revelation comes apart. It's that kind of a thing. So you don't need to hold it with this kind of awe and wonder and worship and tiptoeing around it. It is a book like any other book. And because it's had so many authors contributing to it, saying so many contrary things, it's actually in many ways a worse book than other books because it's not going to cohere. It's not going to be consistent. That's not to say that the Bible is bad overall. There's some poetry there, some historical revisionism. There's a lot of good things that you can look at the Bible and say, oh, look, I like what the author did. But the second you try to make it a unitary whole, you realize how terrible of a book it actually is, how flimsy and shoddy of a story it actually is, and how assailable it actually is. All right, so I hear the lawnmower like really going off outside, so I'm gonna wrap this up. Any comments I need to pay attention to? There's a lot here. Let me go back. I'll see a couple super chats. I'm really just encouraging you, if you're on the verge, if you're on the cusp, if you're looking at this thing saying, I think I see it falling apart, but I don't think I have the courage or the strength or the ability to say that, trust me. I spent the last almost decade of my life thumbing my nose at Bible God, trying to get it to react, and nothing. All right, let me see. David Divide 777. Thank you for the super chat. Can't watch now, and just a shout out. Hey, appreciate you for the £5 super chat. Michael Apple, appreciate you, man. You know I do. Thank you for the $6.66 super chat. You just made some Christian very fearful by seeing that number. I would have totally got that, but I had to do stuff elsewhere, but have some money anyway. So you're saying, I think that I would have totally got that. You're talking about the that the three-body problem was referring to Genesis 18. You're saying you would have got that had you been able to I've been paying more attention to the stream. Appreciate you, yo. Yes, for those who, if you haven't got up on Francesca Stavrakopoulos' book, God and Anatomy, presents a provocative re-examination of the biblical God, challenging traditional views by portraying Yahweh as a corporeal male deity. Indeed. I would show you that book in my library, but it's actually in my Kindle, so I hate physical books. All right, that being the case, unless there's any more super chats here, if you're not a Patreon supporter, join the Patreon. If you are just watching, make sure you like, subscribe, and I'm gonna be doing some more hangouts with folks. Yeah, okay, Michael, I see you. Yep, indeed. But go ahead and enjoy your day or evening if you're watching it in the evening. I'm gonna do the same. Somebody asked me one time, they said, "Hey, you're gonna start telling us?" Oh, I forgot that I still have that on the screen. Somebody said you're gonna start telling us you're fit, like doing the. Somebody said you're gonna do like Dan McClellan and tell us what the T-shirt is. I literally, the way I spend my life, I leisurely lounge around my house in jogging pants and hoodies all day. And right next to my podcast room, I've got a room full of, it's like a room that I turned into a closet. It's just full of clothes. And it's a stack of T-shirts. Hopefully they're ironed. I just reach in that room and pull a shirt out and put it on before I jump on the stream. So I have no idea what I'm wearing when I get on. I barely look at myself in the monitor, so I wouldn't even be able to tell you most times what I'm wearing. All right. Make sure you like and drop a comment. But go ahead and enjoy your day. Much love to y'all. I'll get with you. Peace.